In this session, we will take a closer look at reading fluency. Let's start with defining the term reading fluency. You may already be familiar with fluency as one of the 5 instructional components that was included in the National Reading Panel Report, or NRP. The NRP defined fluency as the ability to read a text quickly, accurately, and with proper expression. Other words we might associate with being fluent include natural, competent, or fluid. When you think of fluency, I want you to think about it as an indicator of the ease with which someone performs a learned skill. In the context of reading, it's the ease with which someone can recognize and make meaning from the words on a page. Fluency develops over time and improves with practice, especially practice that involves direct instruction and meaningful feedback. We expect students beginning to learn a new skill to be disfluent. That's a natural part of the learning process. Attending to fluency in our reading instruction is important because although accuracy is a critical first goal when learning a new skill, becoming a fluent reader is necessary to allow students to focus on the meaning of reading, which is of course our ultimate goal. One additional note from the NRP's findings on reading fluency: silent, independent reading with little guidance or feedback was not enough for many students to improve fluency and overall reading achievement. However, repeated and monitored oral reading was found to significantly improve reading fluency and overall reading achievement. Let's take a closer look at the 3 components of fluency as defined by the National Reading Panel and illustrated in this graphic by the National Center on Improving Literacy. We start with accurate reading as the foundation of fluency. Accuracy is the ability to read words precisely with very few errors. At the beginning of reading instruction, accuracy is strongly associated with decoding skills, or being able to correctly sound out the letters that make up a word. However, as students make progress in their reading skills, reading words accurately depends on their knowledge of letter-sound correspondences in an alphabetic language such as English, as well as their knowledge of morphological or meaningful units in words, in their oral vocabulary bank of known words. Reading speed is the second component of this definition and is referred to within the NRP as reading a text quickly. However, we do not want to encourage students to read as fast as they can, but rather the goal here is to support their ability to instantly recognize words by facilitating a process called orthographic mapping. Orthographic mapping is the process of storing a word permanently in memory for instant retrieval and is key to effortless, accurate, and fluent reading. I want you to think of a student's rate of reading as an indicator of their automaticity in recognizing words effortlessly. It's also important to note that faster doesn't always mean better. Often the 50th national percentile on oral reading fluency norms is found to be a sufficient speed to enable comprehension. This is equivalent to about 100 words read correct per minute at the end of 2nd grade, and maxes out at approximately 150 words read correct per minute on grade level text in the 5th through 8th grades. Once a student reaches a reasonable reading rate, where almost all of the words are recognized accurately and automatically, there aren't any benefits to comprehension found by increasing his or her reading speed. The final component of reading fluency is prosody. Prosody is the ability to read smoothly with expression and intonation that conveys the intended meaning of the text. It includes characteristics such as rhythm, pitch, tone, volume, attending to punctuation, and grouping words into phrases. When we think about these 3 components of fluency and how they relate to comprehension, research shows that building accuracy and reading speed support reading comprehension. They are necessary to enable reading conditions that allow students to gain meaning from what they are reading. Prosody, however, is more of an outcome of comprehension. When students begin reading with phrasing, varying intonation, and expression, it's an indicator that they are actively making meaning from what they are reading. Reading fluency is very closely related to comprehension. In fact, measures of oral reading fluency have been found to predict a student's reading comprehension as well as direct measures of comprehension. How can we explain this observation? Researchers that study reading fluency and comprehension have found that when word recognition is slow and labored, when there is a lot of cognitive energy being dedicated to sounding out and recognizing words, there isn't much cognitive bandwidth left to think deeply about what you are reading. However, once word recognition is accurate and automatic or fluent, you can read the words with very little cognitive energy. That leaves a great deal of cognitive bandwidth available to think critically, apply comprehension strategies, and make connections to what you already know about a topic. This has critically important implications for educators. When we see students struggling to answer comprehension questions, we often want to teach them a comprehension strategy. However, this is unlikely to be helpful to the student if they do not have the cognitive bandwidth available to apply that strategy while they are reading. Reading fluency, this accurate and automatic recognition of words, is a necessary skill to support adequate comprehension and cannot be overlooked. As Dr. Anita Archer frequently reminds us, there is no comprehension strategy powerful enough to compensate if you can't read the words. This instructional hierarchy graphic from MTSS for Success is based on decades-old research from Herring and Eaton. The instructional hierarchy explains the stages we go through as we learn a new skill, any new skill. This could be reading or learning to speak a new language, playing an instrument, or driving a car. Think for a moment about when you first learned to drive. It's likely you learned about several subcomponents first, such as where the gas pedal is, how the steering wheel works, and what the rules of the road are. Like me, you may have been highly inaccurate the first time you tried to activate the left turn blinker or parallel park. This is expected in the acquisition phase of learning a new skill. Hopefully, you received feedback and a lot of practice until you could perform some of these subskills fluently without thinking too much about them. Then gradually, you began to integrate and generalize the skills you learned in isolation in a parking lot, for example, onto a road with very little traffic, and eventually to a highway. Do you remember how terrifying it was to merge onto a highway for the first time? But after years of practice with the skill of driving, you can now do this with ease. That's the instructional hierarchy at work. We build accuracy, then fluency, and then provide new context to generalize and adapt the skill. Now you can listen to the radio or have a conversation while driving, because many parts of that skill have become fluent for you. This is critically important with a skill like driving because we need to free up cognitive bandwidth for in-the-moment adaptations that occur during bad weather or when a dog jumps out in front of you. You're able to think and react in those situations better than a novice driver because so much of driving has become automatic over time. It may be hard for you to remember because reading has likely been an automatic skill for you for so many years, but students go through this same progression as they are learning to read. First, they must acquire sub-skills, such as the ability to blend phonemes, learn letter-sound correspondences, and develop an oral vocabulary that allows them to understand the words they are decoding. They are often highly inaccurate and need feedback from a proficient reader to correct their mistakes and acquire these foundational skills. Then we provide students with opportunities to combine those skills in the context of new words, sentences, and paragraphs to build fluency in word reading. They need lots and lots of practice and repetition to ensure those skills become fluent so they can automatically recognize familiar words in print, which frees up cognitive bandwidth to generalize those skills to new words and have sufficient energy available to devote to making meaning. It's important to go through this fluency building process with each new subskill of learning to read. Blending and segmenting sounds should be automatic. Identifying letter sound correspondences, letter formation, and learning new concepts about print, as we systematically build to that big goal of proficient reading. Individual skills that progress to the fluency and generalization stages of learning are much more likely to be retained over time. They will take less cognitive effort to retrieve from memory, and a student will be able to focus more of their attention to generalizing or applying the skill in a new context. Students vary in the amount of opportunities to respond with corrective feedback they need in the acquisition phase to build accuracy with a new skill. And they will vary in the amount of purposeful practice they need to build fluency. When observing a student struggle with a particular skill, it can be helpful to think about where they fall on this hierarchy and then match your instruction to the correct phase of learning. For example, a high degree of accuracy needs to be established before a fluency intervention, such as repeated or monitored reading, is implemented. Otherwise, your students will just be practicing their mistakes. Let's pause for a moment and think about what we have just learned about fluency and where we might integrate it with what we know about skilled reading development. I see fluency visualized in at least two ways here in Scarborough's reading rope. First, we are helping students acquire new skills in isolation, as depicted by the individual strands at the left side of this image. Over time, skills like blending sounds, decoding, and sight recognition of familiar words become more automatic or more fluent. Even in the language comprehension strands, we know that students are building their fluency orally with the English language throughout their school years, particularly if they are English learners or emergent bilinguals or have a developmental language delay. As students become accurate with those isolated skills and we begin integrating them in the early stages of reading, we are moving students towards reading fluency and proficiency. The second place I see fluency in this metaphor is on the right side of the reading rope, where Dr. Scarborough defines skilled reading as the fluent execution and coordination of word recognition and text comprehension. Again, we see that reading fluency is an essential condition for comprehension and a hallmark characteristic of skilled readers.